microphone around, put it wherever you need. All right, go ahead. Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to provide is true and accurate? I do. Thank you. Are you the same Wendell King who pre-filed testimony and exhibits in this matter? I am. Do you have any corrections to your testimony? I prefer to call them clarifications of just a couple issues. Corrections of what? Corrections are typically very clerical in error. Clerical in error. These concern questions concerning maps that were provided to me, my parcels by Summit. The brief corrections are typically reserved for corrections to your pre-filed testimony. So, of all the parties testifying today, we've read the testimony. The parties have read the testimony, and so the purpose of the cross-examination is for you to clarify that testimony and allow, historically, cross-examination is, in its simplest form, opposing parties. And so this is supposed to be the opportunity for the parties to come up and clarify what they've already said and allow the opposing parties a chance to weigh in, make their arguments, and as Mr. Whippel poignantly pointed out yesterday, sometimes there's some nuance in it. So this is really a chance for everyone to flesh out what you have already filed. So if you have a very tight correction to the testimony you've provided, that would be appropriate. I'm not sure how to answer that. Ease in to what you want to do, and we'll work through it, all right? Thank you. It's simply a statement of confusion. Confusion may be mine, I believe perhaps at Summit's, concerning parcel number 1. There is a statement in the maps provided to me by Summit that there is an easement on that parcel provided by Clay County Rural Water. My first thought was there is, later realized that there isn't. The second item of confusion is that through conversations with the different land managers, I was asked if there were things they could do to help me be more apt to agree with their pipeline. And I said, you have a diagonal route across my 2 parcels. How about considering a north-south, more direct route? Supposedly they have done that. However, I'm left with one parcel with. I'm left with 2 parcels, and the pipeline doesn't meet in the middle, which I think is probably a problem. So again, my confusion or their confusion, it's a problem to be dealt with, which I was quite concerned about until Mr. Murray's testimony with Micah Rory, in which my understanding of his comment was at that time, sir, that he said when it comes to Exhibit H people and those they are serving eminent domain upon, they can do anything they want anyway, and which took care of my 2 problems, my concerns of the pipeline not meeting, because I'm obviously they're going to make sure that happens wherever they want it. Hold on, your objection.
Quite confident Mr. Rory said the exact opposite. He said that on Exhibit H's, they're limited to what is on the Exhibit H. That mischaracterizes Mr. Rory's prior testimony.
Okay. Objections noted. Proceed with your corrections or your clarifications.
Well, that is simply my clarification, and my point is that the maps either have or have not been corrected. They may not be in my possession. Showing the proper alignment of the pipeline between the 2 parcels. I can only hope that Summit is aware of the confusion, for lack of a better word, and that it will be dealt with in due time, one way or another.
Okay. If asked the same questions here today, would you provide substantially the same answers as your direct testimony?
I would, yes.
Okay. Would you like to move admission of your pre-filed testimony and exhibits?
I would.
Are there objections? Seeing none, the board will admit and give the weight due. The board will now allow parties to ask questions. Mr. Jorde.
Can we pull up his map, please? And sir, in the meantime, did you have tile lines on your map that were particularly concerning to you if this project were to go through?
Yes, indeed, I do. Let's see here. So the field in question is split pretty much, runs this way. The entryway for the Simmons proposed pipeline would come here at the very northeast corner and drift diagonally down towards the middle of the two parcels. There is, in the western half of the field, there are tile, mostly old clay tile, draining into a county tile that runs diagonally up from that green spot. There are other tiles, more recent tiles, plastic. I believe they are approximately 10 in nature, east to west, 65 feet apart, starting towards the bottom of the parcel, moving to the north. They all dump into a main tile, which is approximately let's see, let me move over here. I need to explain that the usual existing quarter section fence line no longer exists, as back in the 80s my father purchased these 30 acres. So,
and just for clarity, you are indicating that is your family the landowner not only of the two Exhibit H parcels in red, but to the two 30-acre parcels immediately to the east of your Exhibit H parcels?
I'm sorry, Mr. Jorde, you're saying again? I left my hearing aids at home, sorry.
Oh.
Now let's turn that. Do you need that speaker turned up?
Let me try one more time. We're just making a record, sir, and so I'm just trying to clarify. There's two Exhibit H parcels we're looking at. Are those each approximately 40 acres?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, and then immediately to the right of to the east of where the proposed pipeline in white line is, your family also owns those two approximately that 30-acre parcel there.
Correct. They're 15 acres each, yes.
Okay, so you own ground on either side of the proposed pipeline?
Yes.
Okay, and then just finish with that tile concern, please.
If the settlement were to make simply a straight north and south diagonal, along which would have been the customary quarter section line, they at best would have, or at most I should say, cut perhaps two main tile lines by going diagonally up to a dozen or more.
Does it appear to you, though, that on this picture that the proposed pipeline appears to be going north and south, but with that white line?
I presume that is just representing the normal quarter section fence line.
Okay. Well, I guess I won't get into that. But if hypothetically speaking, that white line there that is very near the quarter section line, if that was approximately the proposed pipeline route, would it still impact some of your tile lines?
Roughly 2 as opposed to 12.
Okay.
Or whatever the number actually is, yes.
Okay, and then that farmstead to the 40-acre parcel to the west of your southern Exhibit H parcel, is that owned by you?
It is not. It is the home of my childhood, the home of my family, and just 12 years ago we sold that off to another party.
Okay, and so there's the family living there?
There is.
All right. And do you know if they've been approached or signed an easement or had any say-so of the proposed pipeline location on your ground?
I do not know.
Can you just briefly describe approximately how many hours you believe you've invested in this, and then any interactions with Summit that are pertinent?
Well, since it all started back in 21, mild abusement at that time up until, shall we say, actually the first of this year. And since January of this year, I think I was going to look up the exact time the first actual contact with the land manager from Summit was. But it's been pretty much a full-time job since the first of this year. And I'm retired. I'm not supposed to work this hard.
And have they offered, that being Summit, any compensation or remuneration for all the effort and hours you've put into this to date?
They have not.
I think you had mentioned something about insurance in your testimony, but could you clarify, is it a concern that you won't be able to get liability insurance? Have you been able to have any conversation with your insurance representative or read your policy?
It's very much a concern. Diane, my wife, in communication with the insurance companies, their basic comeback was, will Summit offer a certificate of insurance, which I think, as we all know, is basically a standard insurance document that a mechanic, a carpenter, plumber would be asked to provide when doing work for an entity of some kind. And the simplest question from the insurance company was, can you get an OCI from Summit? Will they back up their liability with their many independent land contractors? Who has the insurance?
Have you ever requested that Summit add you, should this project be approved and located on your land, that add you as an additional insured on their policy?
No, but that'd be a good idea.
Okay. All right. Was there any other correction, sir, you had to your testimony?
Well, if I may make a clarification, and I guess I would say a clarification as to my feelings toward the Summit and the pipeline. I get the feeling that we should not concern ourselves with Bruce Rossiter and his political and financial influence on this whole process. I get the feeling that Summit would prefer that we not think about Mike Brusolet, a former managing editor, employee of Summit, and now a practicing senator in the Iowa Senate. I think that I get the idea that they don't want us to make that connection. He's the man who stopped the eminent domain bill from proceeding within the Senate. And then, of course, there's the matter of Governor Reynolds and her appointment of members to the Utilities Board. The governor is most certainly correct when she says that people read meaning into everything she says and does. That is true.
Okay. I don't have anything further. Thank you.
Mr. Taylor?
Thank you. I'm confused, which is not uncommon, but the KMZ map up here is what I understand Summit has submitted as a map of the route of their pipeline, and it's my understanding that vertical north-south white line in the middle of the map, just on the east edge of your property, is where they say the pipeline is going, but I think I heard you say it was going to be a diagonal across your property?
The original map, dating of which I've long forgotten, run from that entryway towards diagonally.
Mm-hmm. So
Which would cross a multitude of tile lines.
Mr. King, hold on. Can you just clarify when you say that driveway up in the northeast corner?
Correct, the northeast corner.
Perfect, thank you.
So did Summit change the route?
It's my understanding that they did. And the crux of the problem may be in my inability to. Well, I'm not very swift with technology and keeping track of things, and if my wife doesn't do it, it doesn't get done. So, but according to the paperwork I have and my understanding of it, I have one parcel with a map that shows it going straight. They've corrected that much, but the second parcel map shows it going off this way, and the two do not meet.
Okay. Did you get an Exhibit H notice from Summit, well, like about a month or so ago?
Yes, I believe so.
Was there a map on that?
Two maps of the two parcels, again, not showing the two lines meeting.
Mr. Chair, is it possible to put the Exhibit H notice for Mr. King up on the screen? Now, can we scroll down and find a map? Yeah. Okay. So does that apparently show the route of the pipeline along the east boundary of your property?
Yes, and that is parcel 0205, which is the bottom parcel, the southern parcel. That shows a corrected route. Now, is there a second parcel map there? Well, there again, I guess I have to say admit to confusion, because that shows the two lines actually meeting. The confusion on my part is actually when you start looking at dates, but that's probably not important at the time. But that does show a corrected version for both parcels.
And did you talk to Summit land agents about the route of the pipeline over your property?
Did I talk with them about it?
Did you talk with Summit land agents about the route of the pipeline over your property to try to get it changed, or?
I just offered, they asked, I offered their request, and it appears that they have done so.
Okay. In general, what was your experience with the Summit land agents?
I think there were actually only three in total. A fellow from Des Moines, Urbandale, Lanny from Texas, and Carl at mostly an email. We live in Colorado, so they were all limited to phone calls or emails. General conversation was, did you get our latest offer? Would you care to accept it or make a counter offer? My usual statement was no. As I've said from the beginning, I'm not interested in signing an easement. And from there on, the conversation was, how's the weather?
Okay. Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Ms. Grunhagen?
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. King, my name is Chris Grunhagen, and I'm representing the Iowa Farm Bureau in these proceedings. And I just have a few questions to clarify your testimony here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. On page 3 of your testimony, you testify that it's very close to your home and where you live.
It would be within the half-mile distance, yes. I should say our previous home, which we have sold now to another party.
Okay, so that parcel that you identified for Mr. Jorde that you had sold, that's what you were referencing was as your home?
Yes.
Okay, so you don't live in the area now?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. On page 27 of your testimony, at the beginning, you said you share the concerns of Marvin Lukert and Lauren Starbuda. Do you know who those folks are?
I do not.
Okay. Did anybody help you prepare your testimony?
We asked for and received suggestions from members of the Sierra Club and members, friends, and family.
Okay. Very good. And then on page 30 of your testimony, you talk about some rural water lines.
Yes, that's what I was referring to originally when the original map from Summit, original parcel map, included on the border of the paper was easements listed, and it said Clay County Rural Water. And that's the one I was referring to that originally I said, yes, that's correct. Upon thinking about it, said, no, that's not correct. That particular pipeline is located across the road on a neighbor's property. We do have an adjoining parcel to the west that does have Clay County water line running upon it. And I assume there is an easement with that company, with rural water. I asked and never received any confirmation.
Could staff please pull up page 128 of his attachment? I think this is a map that you identified in your testimony. And so that parcel that's right in the middle of that exhibit that you have there, is that the northern or the southern parcel that you were talking about?
That is both parcels.
Okay.
So the dividing line, this being the north parcel, and then this being the south parcel. This, somewhere in all of these maps, I believe got submitted, shows this being the original pipeline as requested by Summit. The dotted line being the customary but absent quarter section fence line.
And so on this particular map, it would be the east half of the center square, essentially.
East half of, pardon?
Of this, the east half of the square that you see on the exhibit there.
Yes.
Okay. And then across the top, on the north side of that square, I'm just going to call it a square because it's nice, has a nice white outline.
Yeah, well, that's the gravel road, 420th Street. The pipe, the line right below the street, that line is the line that I said, oh yes, that's right. There is a pipeline there, there is a water line easement there, and that was my mistake. That's what I reconsidered days later and recollected that no, the pipeline is actually on Rich Harz's 80 up here, and then it cuts across down here at this point and then goes south on our property.
Okay, so the exhibit shows the rural water easement on the north side of your property. Is that? I mean, that's what I'm reading there. Is that correct?
The exhibit states that there is an easement on this parcel. It does not. It does not show a line representing the pipeline. I did that. So the mistake is actually into saying that there is an easement on this parcel as listed on the map provided.
So the map that you provided, you drew in a line that says rural water. What you're saying is that's not correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so are you saying that the easement is actually on the north side of the road on your neighbor's property? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
No, I'm just saying this parcel here, the west easement, if I may, northwest corner, is listed as having It does have a pipeline on it, and I assume has an easement on it, but that is not the parcel in question, so I don't know what's actually listed there as to what such a map would actually say.
And your map, your hand-drawn map also includes a county tile?
Yes, that is a county tile. That is I believe it's a 12-inch. It is not plastic. It's clay.
So is that owned by the drainage district then?
Pardon, owned by?
The drainage district?
Yeah, it's a county tile. There's no drainage district as such involved to my knowledge, but it is a county tile.
And does that intersect, so the pipeline route that you saw earlier runs down the east side of that parcel? And so does that county tile intersect with that at all?
It does not.
Okay.
The break in the field is basically represented here, where from here on the things slope pretty much to the west, and from here to the east.
Is there anything else you'd like to clarify on this map?
No, I believe not.
Okay. I think it's all the questions I have.
Okay, seeing no other questions. Is that a question? Sorry, you'll have to identify yourself. We haven't seen you here for...
My name is Diane King.
Okay, yeah, Ms. King, you won't, it'll need to be one or the other of you, so he'll have to redirect for your party.
I'm not sure I understand.
It would not be appropriate for you to ask a question.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Ms. Hayek knows the drill. Thank you. All right. Mr. Dublinsky now has something.
Mr. King, at page 27 of your testimony, you were asked a question about who, by Farm Bureau, about who several folks were that you had mentioned in your testimony. And you had said that you weren't sure. I want to go down below that a little bit. You say you adopt the testimony of Dr. Shetler and Carolyn Raffensperger. Can you tell me a little bit about the testimony of Dr. Shetler and Carolyn Raffensperger and what it is that you're adopting?
I cannot. I cannot. Other than what we see in front of us.
Nothing further, Your Honor, but I am inclined to move to strike in that we don't know how much of this testimony this witness...
Sorry, Mr. Dublinsky, can you speak up just a little bit? We're having a hard time hearing you today.
Sure.
You and Brian might have to move closer together.
Yeah. It's not clear how much of this witness's testimony reflects his own views, and some of it clearly does, what he's talking about, his own parcels and things. But, he's making references and adopting testimony of that he's not familiar with, and adopting exhibits tied to those named persons that he's not familiar with. Certainly no foundation for that, and it appears that a lot of this was, as the witness pointed out, sort of borrowed from Sierra Club or others. I think you'll find a lot of this looks awfully like many of the Jorde landowner testimony sections. I just don't know that it's appropriate when the witness is incorporating things that the witness has admitted he's not actually familiar with.
Thank you. Hold on 1 minute.
May I comment?
I'm not sure who had their tent up first. Ms. Ryan?
Your Honor, I would oppose Mr. Dublinski's objection. This is an Exhibit H landowner whose land is subject to eminent domain. He should be able to present whatever testimony he feels is appropriate in this proceeding. Striking his entire testimony because Mr. Dublinski was able to find one line that the witness was not intimately familiar with would be an utterly disproportionate response to Mr. Dublinski's concerns. The board can read the witness's testimony for itself, determine which parts to take more advantage of, but the fact that this landowner is proceeding pro se should give extra latitude to the board's consideration of his testimony.
Thank you. Mr. Jorde?
Yes, I would join in that and further add this gentleman's, I didn't see the top of the testimony, but if it's dual testimony, perhaps this gentleman's wife, who is also separately, independently an intervening party, could ask clarifying questions. He wasn't allowed to refresh his recollection, to look at the attachments, to refresh that those references are dealing with crop loss, yield loss concerns, and so this seems to be pretty unfair given that they are pro se and no one's here to basically help them out.
Okay, Ms. Hayek, you don't have a comment on the objection. You just didn't get your name card up time before summit. We'll sneak you in, I hope. Mr. Dublinski, do you have any comments on your objection? Okay. Would you like to weigh in the objection?
Pardon?
Would you like to weigh in on the objection? Mr. Dublinski's objection?
Simply that there's a lot of material. And at some point or other, I've read it all. Between my wife and I, we've discussed it all. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay. The board notes the objection. We're going to overrule at this time. But appreciate the objection. Ms. Hayek, I moved to summit just a little bit too fast. So for all the other parties that are new here today, we went through this on the first day with the attorneys. Traditionally, we will ask, or we'll tend to the witness. We'll have all the parties ask their questions. Summit will ask their questions. The board will ask their questions, and then we will do redirect. And so if you don't get that placard up quick enough, sometimes it's tricky. But Ms. Hayek, I moved fairly quickly there. So if you want to sneak your question in, that's just fine.
I just have one question. Mr. King, do you believe the IUB should approve Summit's petition to locate its proposed hazardous CO2 pipeline on your land?
I do not.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. King, if you want to go ahead and redirect yourself, which means, I'm sorry, I'm pointing at Ms. Hayek to flip her card. So if you want to go ahead and provide clarification on any of the questions you've been asked today. So if something's been left out there on one of the questions you've been asked that you need to clarify, now would be that time.
What do I limit this to? I would simply like to say that among many things I would like to say, I think that the issue of Minnesota and their 28 miles of pipeline, that as I understand, they are requesting an environmental study, which I find a bit amusing because here we are in Iowa with 700 plus miles of pipeline, but for some reason, we're not interested in pausing this procedure to wait for new guidelines from PHMSA. And I think that's, actually, I think that's kind of an insult to the public of Iowa. As an aside, and I'll be brief, I spent 3 years in the early 70s in the Peace Corps working with farmers in southern Ethiopia. Today, those very farmers are very aware of climate change and what it's doing to their own environment, drought. This is a worldwide crisis. This is something that needs to be addressed. And while I think carbon capture and sequestration is a very important part of that process, my whole thought about this is that the pipeline need not be part of that. The pipeline is what telephone wire was to Bell Telephone. Outdated quickly. When's the last time you used a telephone wire to make a phone call? The funds, tax credits, the public monies towards this project, in which Summit is in pursuit of, should be redirected to carbon capture technology and the use of that technology, not for private enterprise, but for the benefit of Iowans, all Iowans, and more. I'm done.
Sorry, I thought there was a pause. No problem. Well, thank you, Mr. King. Appreciate it. We're going to take a 10-minute break to go off the record. And I believe Mr. Leaders is here now. And I believe it's pronounced Lou Tomko. Am I saying that right? Yeah, okay. So we will be back in about 10 minutes. And we will start off with Mr. Leaders.